I'm a recently retired teacher. I've taught over 30 years, mostly teaching in the reading remediation and also classroom teacher K through 5. I'm a member of the Little Shell Chippewa tribe of Montana, and since I taught on the Indian Reservation, Flathead Indian Reservation, and I am a tribal member, it afforded me a lot of opportunities. I was part of a master's program that SKC, Salish Kootenai College, subsidized and put on, and so I was able to get my master's at Salish Kootenai College with a cohort of teachers. So being a tribal member and working on the Indian Reservation helped me to feel a sense of belonging and helped me to know the children. And as I contributed a lot to educational projects, I felt good about myself, and it instilled pride in my heritage. I graduated from MSU Billings, and my advisor, along with a lot of the instructors, were Native American, and they really helped me and connected with me and gave me a comfortable feeling about being there in Billings on the campus. And I was part of the Indian Student Organization. So, one of the people that were very influential to me was Elaine Meeks. My first job was in Polson, Montana at Cherry Valley, and it was being an instructor for Title I reading. And together, her and I set upon this mission to come up with curriculum that had to deal with limited English proficiency and language learning and literacy. And we began this course of working together and collaborating, and our school became the Montana Distinguished Title I school in Montana. And so that led us to further opportunities to provide professional development even on a national level. And even though I didn't think I could ever do it, she gave me the confidence and the self-efficacy to present these workshops and impart knowledge to other educators. Another person was Julie Kajun. Her and I met while we were going to SKC at that master's program, and we became lifelong friends. And we soon realized we had the common vision for Indian education and Indian students. And we worked together well because we respected each other. I respect the fact that she has this vast array in many areas of breadth and depth of knowledge, and she respects me because I am able to be very one-on-one with my relationship with kids and honor them and get to know the whole child. And I've stayed in contact with many of my students over the years. I don't know, I've always loved children. And to this day, I just look at them and I see who they are and see their little hearts and souls, and I just thought that I could do it. For one thing, I believed in myself that I could be a teacher. My husband was a teacher, so we had a good life together with the same schedules and same routines and stuff. Oh, I have worked with all kinds of students. To name a few, some have been affluent and some have been less fortunate. Some have been gifted and others are underperforming. Some were shy. I have worked with all kinds of students. Some were tribal, some were non-tribal, some were affluent, some less fortunate, some were gifted, others were underachieving, some open-minded and seemed to trust the education system. Others were closed-minded and scared of the non-trusting of the education system. Some were risk takers and others were cautious. I say all these examples because in the classroom, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get all kinds of students, and it's going to be up to the teacher to build relationships with each one of them and see them for who they are and honor them as a person. I always believe that you put the child at the center of teaching, and I had to become very flexible in my thinking and had to sort of even check my perspectives if I had any stereotypes, or examining my own assumptions in working with kids. That you can go in and seem to think you know who these kids are, but you don't really, so you have to work on your own self-growth, and know that every child that you come in touch with has a story, and so you get to know the story, and also then treating them with patience and kindness. So when I was working at Cherry Valley, we made sure that we had a lot of activities going on and invited families in and invited children to be part of it. We did fun activities, academic nights, art nights, things that we would even do projects at school. Would be as simple as having a meal and having the kids come in and share something from the classroom that they had done. Just had an open door policy, and just that's how you get to know the kids in the classroom, but also when they come into the school setting. I attended once you got to know the families, you know the brothers and sisters, and you knew what their interests were. I attended a lot of the things that they did, like basketball games and extracurricular and plays, and just seemed to be always a part of their life and be visible in their life. Also at Cherry Valley, we would have community-oriented activities or fun nights where we'd bring in a speaker, an elder, or storytelling, something to go with the curriculum that sort of broadened the curriculum for families and students. Well, when I was teaching reading intervention, it was easy to be close to the parents because I would see them all the time. I'd work with the students every day, and they'd always ask how their kids were doing, and I would give them like very close or very quick updates on their growth. And seeing some of the families, even at the China Garden, anywhere in town, you'd see them. I would always talk to them, and we developed close relationships with most of the families. When possible, I would use culturally appropriate books, although in the position I had, we had to use leveled readers, and there wasn't a lot of culturally appropriate books. But how I brought their culture and identity into it was whatever book we were reading, and it showed some family maybe celebrating a birthday a certain way, we would discuss the kids, like, how do you guys do this? How does your family celebrate, or where do you go for on walks? So using the book in front of us to connect with the kids and build their identity and know about their family. When I was in the classroom, I did activities that would bring the parents into the school classroom, like plays, interviews, whenever possible. We would use cultural appropriate materials in the tubs that we'd have at our school in teaching social studies and science. Invite guest speakers into the classroom a lot. First thing I want to talk about with that is the hidden curriculum. I was always aware of the hidden curriculum in the classroom or the environment, school environment as in general. But to look at things that aren't in the regular curriculum, like the makeup of the classroom, were the desks in a row? Were the kids able to get up and move around? What were the rules? What were the expectations for behaviors? How did the kids treat each other within the classroom? And then also kind of taking stock of my own nonverbal communication, and thinking about my gestures, maybe my eye, facial expressions, because all those things the kids could see right off the bat before any curriculum was taught. And as far as the curriculum, I tried to do learning activities that were activity-based and meaningful and relevant to the students. I focused a lot on language and bringing in prior knowledge and making sure that the academic language was explicitly taught to the children when you were teaching something new. Tried to make sure that the children felt safe and comfortable in my classroom, and therefore were able to be themselves, and tried to be inclusive so that all kids had high expectations. A broader concept of storytelling, and for me, everyone has stories, and we all have stories, and getting the kids to talk about their stories and tell their stories is really important. How I would do this is, first I would share a story of mine and then get them to write their stories and share. And it could be oral or written. It could be a story about a dog. It could be a story about a special time, a special celebration, a time they felt sad, a time they felt happy. And this was all to get them involved in storytelling, to really know that it comes from a personal place, and all stories are different, but everybody has a story. I would try to get elders in and guest speakers in the classroom. A story could be used to introduce a new topic of learning, or could bring history and math alive. As far as cultural storytelling, our schools that I worked in had recommended books that we were able to read, such as the Coyote stories were to be read in the winter months. But as far as storytelling, I would do my own research if I could, and talk to colleagues. I'd ask the librarian what worked, and just go to anybody you can to figure out a story that would work. And read stories. I would read stories to children a lot and help them build their visual memory or vision, help them build their visual imagery by listening to stories, and also talk about the content of the story and the lesson learned, and realizing that each student might learn something different from the stories that they heard. There's just not one answer to all the stories. Well, I have an interesting way of presenting literacy to children, and I love visual posters. So I start the lesson out by having a quadrant, a big poster, and then it's divided into quadrants, and I'll have the reading, listening, speaking, and writing. And under each area, I would brainstorm. I would tell the kids different. This is not really a brainstorming, but under reading, for instance, I would have reading to, reading with, and reading by, and try to talk about that with the kids. What does that mean? Like, sometimes I will read to you, sometimes you will read with another person, or sometimes you will read by yourself. And so starting with that foundation, and then going into some of the reading skills, obviously, since I'm a reading teacher, going into the reading skills, and then the different genres for the books. I'll go back. As far as the reading skills, there's different reasons and purposes for reading. Sometimes you do critical reading. Sometimes reading is for entertaining. Sometimes it's to find out something. And every time when we read a different genre of book, we'd go back to this poster and either start writing a list of genres, or just understand that this is reading, but this is different. This genre is unique. Then going to speaking, I would try to talk about the basic speaking skills and having the kids learn basic speaking skills, such as the pace that they're speaking in, the voice level, the clear pronunciation, and then knowing your audience. And so that would be under speaking. And then we talked about the different kinds of speaking, such as conversational speaking, doing interviews, dramatic plays. Then we go to, I'm just trying to go through this poster, but the next one might be listening. And so I'd start with listening skills, paying attention, focusing your attention, listening for different purposes, listening for 2 or 3 step directions, because I noticed that the kids, you had to actually explicitly teach that. They didn't really know that. Listening for lectures, speeches, getting information from that, maybe listening to music. What kind of different skill set is that? Then for writing, talk about the different genres for writing, talk about the writing skills, of course, and the genres that they might be coming up, learning in the school, or in the classroom. Talk about personal writing, where they do narratives and their own stories. Expository writing, when they might do reports and essays. And creative writing, when they might do like poems and lyrics and things like that. And I found that if you give kids the whole and the reason why that you want them to learn something and the purpose for learning it, then they will be able to understand it more, because it's not just the teacher saying, oh, today we're going to do a reader's theater for purposeful, meaningful learning. I found that works good. And then also I'm a proponent of the visual poster always being up in the classroom and then adding to it all the time. What are we going to be doing today? Oh, where do you think that fits in? What literacy is that developing or practicing? Well, a culturally responsive manner calls for a risk-free, safe environment so that the children can actually tell you what they know. Assessment is necessary because you want to know what they know and hold them accountable for it. And also it guides the next learning step for the child. So basically when I was doing reading remediation, I would assess through running records, and which is an ongoing assessment. And the kids got really used to doing these running records. And so they would have a choice. They could do a book choice on which level. You have to do a certain level, but they would be able to choose. So there was some choice. And they would have a goal set beforehand. Perhaps the student was learning about fluency. And so we sat down to do the assessment. They knew that they were going to be trying to improve their fluency or their words per minute. Maybe they were working on errors and self-corrections, the ratio of those, and that's what they knew they were working on. They were going to try to improve it, and so we would graph it after each assessment, and they knew exactly where they were and how they could improve and where they wanted to go. So involving the student in their own assessment was really key. Classroom teachers I use a lot of performance-based assessment, such as writing an essay or writing a story or doing a slideshow on what you've learned. So performance-based assessment has to be done and include a rubric, because if the kids know what's expected of them and what they need to do to succeed and get a good grade, then that creates them to be more comfortable and succeed in their performance. So rubrics are key as far as assessment when you And then also I have a story of when they do, those are considered maybe informal assessments, but formal assessments such as the old Iowa basics or the MAP testing that children have to do, standardized testing. I found that if you let the student know ahead of time, this is what's going to happen. You got to sit in your seat. You can't get up. Super quiet. Even when you're finished, you can read a book to give them the expectations of the behavior that they needed to do when they had those standardized testings, because that is a whole different ballgame. So I think preparing the kids for what's going to come, and even practicing, we would practice and put the timer on for a certain amount of time, and they couldn't talk and they couldn't get up and that. So with formal assessment, really making the children know exactly what they're going to be doing. When I was a first grade teacher, I had a student named Billy Ray, and I was also her kindergarten teacher. So she came with me to do first grade, and I had 2 years of her. So we had a really good relationship, and I knew a lot about her as a learner, and she knew how I operated, and we were super close. But it came time to do Iowa Basics, and we were doing, to get ready for Iowa Basics, we were doing like hands-on manipulatives, trying to figure out addition and subtraction and get the right answer. I was kind of focused on the right answer, and so I did all kinds of things that were really good methodologies and techniques for teaching math. So the day comes for for teaching addition. So the day comes for the Iowa Basics, and the kids are all set up, in their own little space in the classroom. And I told them ahead of time, I cannot help them at all. Don't ask me any questions. I want to help you, but I can't. So I noticed Billy Ray crying in the back of the room, and I went up to her. I said, "What's the matter? Why are you crying? Why are you crying?" She goes, "I just can't do this." I said, "Yes, you can. We practice all the time. We've been doing this." And I did even say, "Remember all the cubes we do?" And we did all kinds of different manipulatives to figure out these answers. And I said, "You can do it, Billy Ray. You can do it." She's like, "No, I can't." And then I said, "Why?" And she goes, "I don't know what addition means." And I'm going, oh, I forgot to do the academic language on that one, because all my trying to do the things right with hands-on manipulatives and everything, it didn't help her in this instance because the word threw her off. And in my teaching and my experience, that can happen a lot with kids. So in preparing kids for assessment, you have to make sure they know the academic language. Well, I think in order to be a trauma-responsive educator, you have to be a trauma-informed educator. That is, you have to know the impact that trauma has on behavior and learning. And again, we take a good look at the environment and try to create a trauma-sensitive environment. One of the things you could do for that is to look at your routine and to make sure that you have routines every day, that they're the same, and that the child isn't going to expect something different every day. So consistent daily routines. And then promote a predictable environment. Like, it's always going to be this way. I'm always going to be here as a teacher for you. I'm always going to expect the other kids to act and behave a certain way. One thing you could have set up ahead of time is a place for a child to go if they needed to be alone within the classroom, or you could have a plan set up if you needed to get the rest of the children out of the classroom for any given reason for behavior issues. So have that all in order already. Another thing would be to model positive coping skills. I mean, there was many times in my teaching when I would just say, "Okay, stop, time out. This is not working. Something went wrong with this lesson. Let's just stop right now." And that models to the kids that life doesn't always work out just perfect. And there are times where you just take a break and step back and take care of yourself. And then another thing you can do is provide choice in the classroom. Teachers have come up with this schedule or this planning that the student is responsible to go to 4 different areas. They have to do a writing task, reading, either with someone or by themselves. Maybe they'll do a lesson, a phonics lesson, but they get to choose when they want to do it. And so there's a way that they can put their little popsicle stick up and say, okay, first I want to read, and then I'm going to do my phonics, and then I'm going to do the listening center. So that choice alone has children can be held more accountable for their own learning. Being in a trauma responsive classroom is to have a high regard for each child, and in that high regard to have hope, because that's an element that these children really need. That, maybe they're acting out or exhibiting something because of the trauma that they've experienced, but always letting them know it's okay, there's hope for change, or, you believe in them, and then that trusting environment, that trusting relationship can be restored. Well, I think just by being aware of cultural values, and don't want to sound stereotypical about this, but cultural values such as cooperation, adaptability, flexibility, being harmony, responsibility to the past, the present, and the future, respecting elders and traditions. Okay, I'll go back to my culture values. Under the culture values, I also wanted to include kinship and respect for nature. These are culture values that can be brought out in the classroom. And then also community, using community resources, community people, place-based curriculum, local environment, being aware of the plants and the animals and the land that you live on, and important people. And then curriculum, adding social emotional competencies to the curriculum, so that you're building, the competencies are self-identity, self-management, social awareness, responsibility, and decision making. So whenever possible, bringing those into the classroom with lessons or activities, or however you would want to place those in your curriculum. Setting high expectations for students will empower students to become their best and to be aware of their cultural identity and see themselves in the world as a cultural person or a person. I think that the social emotional competencies will allow our children to create a sense of wellness and a sense of well-being, and that should definitely be in the classroom as in the curriculum. Well, I think the acknowledgement of cultural knowledge is the first step, and I think that change and learning about culturally responsive teaching could happen within the school if a group of teachers, a team of teachers supported by administrators, could do a book study approach to delve into the constructs of culturally responsive teaching. Topics such as cultural identity, appreciation of cultural otherness, providing teaching and learning activities that are relevant to the students' lives, authentic assessment, place-based curriculum. These are just a few things that could be studied within the school, and I think that if a change could actually happen if it occurred in the school, because it would be relevant to what they needed, it would meet their needs. And there's a lot of places you can go to find out this information. You don't have to know it, or you can seek this information. Basically, you can Google anything and you can find out like the basic understandings of things through that way. And there's books out there, so many book studies and books on the available by prominent educators. It's just a matter of finding the right professional development tool. I know, I think it just takes a big, huge person with not a lot of ego to say, oh, I'm sorry, I better find that out. Because, like I said, you could find it out through locals, through elders, through families. And so I think just to be vulnerable enough to admit it, that you don't know and that you're sorry and that you didn't mean to create any false assumptions or false beliefs. I would say to find and use resources. So try to go as local as you can. If there's a tribal education department near you, or a college, Indian parent committee, there's so many resources that you could go to. Culture committees, local elders, presenters, consult people to find the right answers. Look for the resources. There's educational resources out there in the form of tubs, especially social studies and science. Tubs have been developed, and I think they're housed either at the state of Montana, or a lot of schools have individual tubs available. Use those. Those have been produced by a group of educators who have spent a lot of time on that. My mantra, my motto, when in doubt, find out. Consult the local people and the resources. They're free, and they'll give you answers that you can live by and feel good to teach. Let's see, don't make assumptions about students and family. Do not be fearful of making the wrong mistakes. Otherwise, you won't do anything. Put the child in the center of all you do. See the whole child in front of you, social, emotional, mental, and physical. Be kind and courteous to families. And in conclusion, I would like to say, we don't have to go it alone. In my life, and in my experience, in working with the two people I mentioned earlier, Elaine and Julie, I was able to achieve great things because we worked together. Collaboration and working together was the key to my success. I was able to bring my talents to the table, and others were able to bring their talents. If we allow students to work together and bring their talents into in learning, we can develop self-efficacy in the child, and that is knowing that each child knows and believes they have the capabilities to do a job, to perform a job, and manage a situation. And that is fundamental in giving our students. So working together and working in pairs is really important. As you go through pre-service and education, believe in yourself that you could either, if you don't possess the knowledge or the skills that you want, you can gain them with perseverance and just staying with it and putting your heart into teaching, because it will have a lasting effect